Good evening, televiewers. Welcome to another edition of Prime on My Midi Prime TV. And the issue that is going to be looking at part 2 of a subject we treated last week, which is asking whether the West could still be considered as responsible for our underdevelopment as the African continent, especially in this year 2024. Should we still be accusing the West for our the situation? We're going to be looking at this with two panelists who were invited for tonight's edition of the program. One is still caught in traffic, but our permanent consultant is in the house. Dr. Apostle Ambe Valentine Angwai is in the house with us. Good evening. We're glad to have you once again.
Good evening, Mr. Leo. Good evening, televiewers of Prime Hour. Good evening, Cameroonians, and welcome to this session of Prime Hour. We are going to be discussing something very essential, and I think this topic will actually clarify a lot of things that most Africans are holding on, thinking that the West, in quotes, is responsible for the challenges we are going through in Africa. I want to believe that that question is 100%, I beg your pardon, 70% no, and probably 30% yes. So in an argument today, we give Africans the understanding that it's not actually or absolutely the problem of the West that we are facing. Very, very serious problem happening, that it's properly treated. We can only take note of what the West is in Africa.
Okay. We are also expecting Andrew Atemibako, who is an expert in this domain. He is a Pan-Africanist. We hope he beats traffic and join us in the course of the program. But I'm going to start with you, Dr. Apostle Ambe Valentine, since you're the person for the studio right now. When you look at 2024 and Africa's development, are you impressed or you regret why we should be where we are?
Mr. Leo, everybody is regretting, not just me alone. Beginning from our home country, Cameroon, to other parts of Africa, it's regrettable, even though a few African countries are taking the challenge to, boost up their economy as well as their infrastructure. A greater portion of the African continent is going through a lot of trouble and a lot of economic meltdown, and these are reasons why we have to be able to point out some of these things that are tormenting our people. And so much has been thrown upon the West, but unfortunately some of us have gone out, we've traveled to see a few things and learn from places to understand that we have a very serious problem back at home. The worst thing that can happen to a people is when they do not know the source of their problem. Number two, if they accuse people for being responsible for a problem that they themselves cause. Also, when a people are not willing to take up the challenge to correct the errors that they make, they're attributing their mistakes and blaming or throwing blames upon others. Such people can never and ever grow. That is exactly what Africa is facing right now. I know many will stand to argue me that, the West is exploiting Africa through International Monetary Fund, through the World Bank, through all the UNESCO and all put together United Nations and Commonwealth and Francophonie, all strategies put in place to exploit the African continent. Yes, those are all channels through which the West uses to penetrate the continent Africa. But I want to say a greater problem of this continent Africa or African countries is caused by the leadership of the African countries. Most of the African leaders are very, very, I put it with all humility and respect, they are very, very irresponsible. Irresponsible in the sense that they are not willing to take steps that will make their countries change. They are not willing to take practical steps that can transform their nations. They are not willing to engage principles and to apply procedures that can bring change to their nations. I speak as one who has been around some African countries, and I've been to Europe, and I've been to some other countries, and I understand practically what I'm talking about. This is because, number one, Mr. Leo, we accuse Europe of stealing in Africa. Europe is a thief as well as Africa is a thief. Africa is a thief, Europe is a thief. But Europe is a patriotic thief. Let me use it this way. Let me bring this word if it's not in English. Europeans are patriotic thieves. Africans are selfish thieves. Europeans are generous thieves, while Africans are greedy thieves. Europeans they steal for their people. Africans steal for themselves and their families. With such, you would definitely think that one is exploiting the other. Africans steal, Europeans steal. I put it clear. Europeans exploit us. True, they come collect our raw materials. They give us all kinds of debts and suppress us. These materials are taken back to Europe, transformed and sold to Africa. You will hardly find out that one of those people in Europe or the government of European countries are exploiting or exhausting the money that comes to them. I just came from France. There are privileges that they give to citizens in France. It tells you that everything that France comes to steal in Africa is for the betterment of their nation. Paris is under construction every day. Old buildings are being knocked down, new buildings are erected. Roads that have cracked, they are under maintenance. In Paris, if you have 3 children, the government begins to pay you. Sometimes houses are given to people who do not have houses. France has the best social system in the world. School is free, as well health is free. That is your money that they stole from Africa. That's a thief who knows how to manage resources. So when you go to France, you may think that they are too rich. This is because they thief and make use of this. They steal and make use of this money. Back in Africa, we have people who are stealing billions, stocking them in their houses, stealing billions, stocking them under the ground. They dig bunkers, bury money inside. That money is never used to do anything to advance the economy. Presidents embezzle billions, ministers embezzle billions. They steal this money, but the money does not circulate. Now, these guys out there steal from Africa, yet the money circulates. What is actually the problem? The thieves in Europe are patriotic. The thieves in Africa are self-centered, greedy, and they are very, very wicked. That's the reason why they steal the money. It does not circulate into the system. I was just going through information today, and Tinubu has placed a demand for 1.77 trillion naira debt. The parliament just endorsed a 1.77 trillion naira debt for Nigeria. After what the nation is going through, the president is doing that kind of borrowing at this particular juncture in the nation. What is he leaving as legacy for the next president, the next generation, the next upcoming youth? That money is borrowed to do what? You will go and check. Roads will not be constructed. You won't find better hospitals. You won't find good living standard for the people. You will not find free education. You will not find free health. You will not find infrastructures erected in the nation. All that money will be swindled and kept in the pockets of people. Are you going to tell me that it is the whites or it is the Europeans that would tell them to borrow some amount of money without tarring roads? Who stops them from tarring roads, constructing hospitals?
Yeah, you say Africans do not know where their problems are coming from.
They know.
Yeah, but you say the most dangerous thing is for one to leave without knowing where
the problem is coming. Yes.
Yeah. Why do you give the impression that we don't know where the problem? We know where the problem is.
The issue is we are blaming the wrong people. Okay. What I'm trying to say is that we are blaming the wrong people. And the worst thing to happen is that you don't know the source of your problem and you are blaming the wrong source. If you call 10 Africans on this platform, they will tell you that the West is responsible for the dilemma of Africa. The West is responsible for the misfortune happening in Africa. That is to say, you are blaming somebody else without knowing actually where your trouble is coming from. That's what I'm trying. That was the foundation I was trying to lay here. But what I'm trying to call the attention of Africans to understand that the trouble we are facing back at home here, Mr. Liu, is more dangerous than what the West is doing to us. Because in this world, everybody is working for their interest. The West will not come here to entertain you. We will definitely not go over there also to entertain them. As much as they say the West are coming here to collect money from us, we also go over there. Somebody was just caught recently to have swindled a company in America 1.1 billion. That is not IMF. That is a black man taking money from a white man. When they take that money from there, what do they do with it in Africa? That's the problem. They are taking us through raw materials. We are taking it through scam. Those people went there also and collected money from them, 400 and something million. What did he do with that money in Africa? These are some of the things I'm telling you that we are stingy and unpatriotic thieves. Everybody is a thief. The Europeans are thieves. The Africans are also thieves. You and I are here. People embezzle finances from government. Ministers gather much money and go and buy houses in Europe. And sometimes they die without even visiting those houses. Who is benefiting at the end of the day? It tells you that we have not accepted the fact that we have a problem back home here, that we do not want, first and foremost, to develop our own policies that will help push foster.
No. Let's put squarely. It is true that many persons are still not going to buy your session. I really would have loved to have him here at Tebako. He's coming.
He's on the way.
But yes, but what would explain that we fought for our independence in the 60s as a continent across the board, but 2024 we still are singing the songs of the 1960s, because in the 1960s we said, leave us and we're going to handle our affairs so that we can develop, we can decide for ourselves. But 2024, we still are looking back to those, because we are holding back to colonialism. Yeah.
Exactly what I was trying to explain to you, that from 1960, we asked for independence. They gave us independence. Till date, we are still complaining that they are still controlling our resources. They are still influencing us. To some extent, they are still influencing our resources because they put puppet leaders that listen to them and control activities from outside. They also set up structures in Africa that still influences and controls our activities. For instance, we have named the United Nations, we've named La Francophonie, Commonwealth, UNESCO, International Monetary Fund, World Bank. These are all structures put in place that penetrate and suck the African continent dry. That's said and done. That one gives them leverage to penetrate the African continent and access their own portion of the world that circulates in this continent. That's understood. But that does not stop African leaders from managing the resources at their disposal to develop their countries. So the issue is, if we are throwing the blame completely to what the West has done to Africa, then we have refused also to accept the fact that we are part of the problem we are going through. I said the problem is 70% caused by Africans and 30% caused by the West. This is because the West, to some extent even, because of the retaliation of African continent and African countries, they are beginning to negotiate. For instance, 80% or 85% of the income of the French South Africa was in the French treasury. It has dropped to 50%. It's no longer 85%. You understand? They were giving huge sums of money every year back to France. You realize that the money has been reduced because there's a pressure now from other countries entering into Africa. The European countries should have full control over Africa and collect their resources, are even afraid because this time around India is coming in, Lebanon is coming in, Russia is coming in, China is coming in. These are all bodies that also are negotiating better deals with African countries. So sometimes the poor have been there for that long, also are dropping down their stakes in order to be able to be relevant in the market continuously. If not, these new parties coming in may jeopardize their stay in Africa. So why now that things have reduced to a certain extent? Why is that we are still crying and singing the same song that we sang in the 60s, the 70s? We have been given more opportunities now to manage more of our resources. Why is it that this time around our resources are not even able to match up with the demands of the people? It tells you that back in 1960s and 70s, when they were controlling the resources at the greater proportion, it was in the control of the West. But this time around, much has been given under our control. Why are we still going through the same challenges? Is it the West that used to tell ministers to take money that is meant to tar roads and embezzle it? Is it the West that told the ministers who were given budget to construct schools and buildings for the nation, they embezzled it? Yeah, but is it the West that told them to eat money that was meant for hospitals and stadiums? Is it the West that was the one that instructed that, okay, they have given you a Japoma complex, you sit and embezzle the money? Is it the West that told them? These are things we are not willing to point out, and we keep beating around the bush saying that it is the entire West. It is not totally the West that's responsible. I stand to defend this on any platform across the globe, that the West is not fully responsible for Africa's dilemma.
Can we also look at where we are owing to the political instability we have had in most of these African nations?
Yes, the political instability in most of the African nations, in quotes, it is addressed, it is considered that it's the West that influences political activities in the African continent. To some extent, it is true. but it is not 100%. The reason why I'm giving a portion of this blame to Africa and a portion to the West is because the challenge is evenly distributed now. And if at all, with the advancement we have had so far, if we're able to manage the opportunities given to us, we will not be even pointing fingers at the West anymore. Why do I say the political instability? They say it is the West. It is not the West that tells a president to stay in power for 40 years, 45 years. It is not equally the West that would tell the people of a nation to be insisting for a president to stay in power who has been in power for many years. For instance, the Togolese just changed their constitution. It was a parliament of that nation that changed that constitution and gave the president the opportunity to be running for six years. They are almost making him a permanent president in that nation completely. Is it the West that came down and changed that constitution? Because the interests of the people are protected. A few are under the bondage, the masses are under the bondage of a few. They sit and make conclusions because they want to keep an hegemony for their children and their children's children. Look at what is happening in most African countries. And is it the West that comes there and tell the parliament to vote this in, to do that? Is it the West that conducted the elections in Nigeria, where the chairman of the Electoral Independent Commission will collect some huge amount of money and twist the result? Is it the West that gave them? The greediness of African leaders is responsible for the challenges we are going through. Don't tell me that it's the West that called the chairman of INEC in Nigeria and gave him $200 million to swing elections in favor of somebody who is not even able to sit on the seat. These are all the things that we are not willing to accept. I used to tell people that if we have a bad leader, Mr. Leo, hold the people, because the people are also part of the game for that man to become a bad leader. For instance, do you know that we come and see people who placards and say, but Bali stands for Pobia to come for 25 elections. Manfe stands. Is it West that told them? Is it the West that told them? No, we should be sincere. People get up and then they put a wrong leader. Then tomorrow they cry and complain the leader is not treating them very well. Look at the number of persons. A young man will go at the age, a young man and in his 30s will carry a big plaque to call for a man who is tired to come back to power. Is it the West that told them? These are the things we're supposed to call out, and people are not willing to accept it. That tomorrow a young man like me, I go and stand in the stand and say, President Pobia to come back for elections in 2025. Is the West that told me? It's what I'm looking for. We saw a young man that carried a very big placard and said that President Pobia to come back to power. You and I know very well that at the level where power is right now, power needs rest. We need him in this nation as a councillor, not a president anymore. We need him as a hero that will be as a guide to the younger generation, not to belabor him again in an office that he cannot handle. But you see, the same people are calling him to come back. Now tomorrow when it comes to power and things are not done, they say this country is bad. It's the West, it's the West, it's the West. I want to find out if it's the West that is giving motion of support for people to come back to power.
Okay. But how do we overcome this issue of political instability?
Political instability is something that will never come to an end. Okay. Because, Mr. Liu, you and I grew in Cameroon, and Africa, having a perspective of African history, we grew in fondoms and chiefdoms. And these fondoms and chiefdoms were hereditary in nature. When a father dies, the son takes over automatically. But unfortunately, they have introduced us a system of government giving us the impression that everybody has access to power. But unfortunately, individuals are maintained in power. It is monarchy that is established, but democracy is preached. Monarchy is established, democracy is preached. So when somebody rises up democratically, the monarchical system rises against you and crack you down. We will keep on pressing for democracy, while the reality and the undertone of that democracy is pure monarchy. A man is in power for 30 years, 40 years, and he wants to go, he puts on his son. Is that no monarchy? But they keep telling us that it's a democratic state. It's a democratic state, and they have a democratic principles. They have democratic protocols. Then somebody gets up tomorrow and wants to contest. He is practically winning the elections before everybody, yet monarchy stands in place and rolling out. I was called in a meeting somewhere, and I said to them that we don't have a challenge winning elections in Cameroon. We have a challenge moving into the presidency. So you should go beyond just winning elections and start thinking on how to move into the presidency, because what is on ground is not democratic. democratic in the sense of democracy. They will preach you democracy. I said one time that the system in Africa has been introduced to something they are not used to. Like Guillaume Ferdinand Lopo, in his book said, "Les pieds de Mecca, ne peut pas entrer le chaussure de blanc." It means they brought canvas from Mecca on the eve of his medal, the Ummah, the medal. His legs, his feet had grown on bare feet. They had gone beyond that sandals, than the canvas. He couldn't wear it. That was a figure of speech communicating to us that the Europeans brought something that the Africans were not able to wear. Africans have grown for hundreds of thousands of years with chiefdoms and fiefdoms. You are bringing democracy. I was in the UK and I said they should define democracy within the African context, because we have a challenge with the democracy in Africa, and that democracy does not apply the same in every nation. The Canadian democracy is not the British democracy. And I told them, I say, you have parliamentary democracy in UK where there is a king and then there is a parliament that votes a prime minister, and the prime minister is even still confirmed by the king. That's not democracy that is in America. The democracy that is in America is a kind of different kind of democracy than the one that is in Nigeria. So let us define the democracy within the African context. Is it the one that we have kings who are going to sit on a throne permanently and their children inherit their throne, while we set up a parliament and a government where somebody can be re-elected in that area? Because you give us the impression that the kings you have put on the throne can be dethroned through elections, okay, of which they cannot be dethroned.
We have just been called in by Mr. Litunga Boris, who is calling in from Boya to be part of tonight's edition of the program. Yes, Mr. Boris, you are very anxious to be part of this discussion tonight. What, according to you, is responsible for our situation? Should we still be talking about what the West is doing to us?
Mr. Leo, thank you very much, and greetings to all the panel members. It is an honor to be with you people. Since from the last Thursday that we had this conversation, and at the end of the day today, we are finally here still having a retalk on this. Okay, based on your topic, what I'll tell you is we have moved from that part where we are still under the control of the whites or the European. The issue we are having is us. We refuse to take responsibility of our poor actions. We refuse to stand up for development. You can't believe that we have projects that the government is aware and have sent money for the projects which counts for the development of the people, but you never see the projects being manifested. We cannot say they are the white people who are doing that to us. It's out of wickedness that we have refused to see how we can independently, as a country, work for the betterment and the growth of our people, which we need to take into serious priority that transformation. When we have the means to bring this transformation, we have to do it with all our heart. Okay, let's look at our neighboring country. When a governor is being elected in the state, before they elect you, there are things that you have to do. Let's start from there. When I'm seeing the Reverend talking of how democracy is not being defined. All those things are being defined. Look at the law. Look at the law that we have in Cameroon. Look at the documents that are there to guide all these things. Do you think that they are not there? They are there. And they know it. The problem is that it's not being respected because they have selfish interests. It is in this regard that I will tell you confidently, Mr. Leo, based on the question you asked me, is the West still responsible for Africans underdevelopment? I'll tell you that no. It is us as a person that has refused to do with the needful. They cannot put you as a mayor. They cannot put you to control, to manage the affairs of your jurisdiction or your community, and there's no development, people are not seeing anything. So are the whites the ones telling you not to do those things? I'll tell you no. We are seeing it every day. We don't need to call names. We don't need to call places. But if we look all around us, we'll see that we really need to put the human empathy as the human responsibility in front. It is very important, Mr. Leo.
Okay, it is very important. I'll come back to you. Dr. Apostle Ambe Valentine Angwa, let's look at the influence of religion. They say the West came with the Bible and with the gun behind to them. Okay, the West, they say religion is the opium of the mind, so we were blinded by the West, so they stole our why we consume religion. Should we still be thinking about this? Does religion actually tell you not to develop your nation?
It's the impression put by African writers. Writers like Chinua Achebe, through his book Things Fall Apart, demonstrated so much prowess.
Yeah, but when you look at the context, he wrote in those days, maybe thinking that that was the situation.
I'm trying to...
Should we still be... Yeah.
But that's what we've read. Those are the books they gave us in school. I'm going to give you African writers that gave us the impression that religion is the problem of Africa. Number one, Chinua Achebe. He gave us the impression in his book that religion is a major challenge in Africa. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, they gave us the impression that colonialism is a challenge in Africa. Wole Soyinka, in his book The Trials of Brajero, gave us the impression that religion is a serious challenge in Africa. But they fail to understand that almost every nation has a religion. They are trying to reduce religion to Christianity and Islamism. But they fail to understand that a country like South Korea is a Buddhist inclination. Japan has a shrine for Shintoism. China is a Buddhist nation. Indonesia, Malaysia, they are Muslim nations. America is founded on Christianity. British Christianity. Italian Christianity. So why are they trying to give us the impression that the one that came to Africa is the wrong one? It's the same Jesus that was preached everywhere. Now, has China not developed with Buddhism? Has Japan developed with Shintoism? Is South Korea not making advancement, even with, as a Buddhist nation? And Christianity is even overtaking Buddhism now in South Korea, yet they are making progress. Who bewitched Africans to think? Now, before we ever had religion in Africa, what was the development? Didn't we practice witchcraft, human sacrifices? Didn't we consult deities? What were the inventions and the things that the Africans produced before religion came? Let's stop hiding behind all this manipulation in the name of religion affecting Africa. Now, those who are not practicing religion in Africa, what have they brought so far? That is a question we should be asking, because not every African is a Christian. Neither is every African a Muslim. There are many Africans who are neither Christians nor Muslim. They are traditionalists. Let us see what they have done so far, because they were supposed to be bringing results. I've said that the true test of knowledge is no explanation. The true test of knowledge is testimony. If somebody says he knows something, he should produce result in that thing. He should not explain the thing. Because we live in a society where people explain a lot without any result. The true test of every knowledge you've acquired is the testimony you produce out of that thing. There are a lot of people who can explain theories, expound philosophies and theses, but they don't have the ability to produce result in that thing. So result is a true test that you have known something. Somebody can talk about finance but does not know how to make finance. So the issue is, those who are not religious in Africa, what are the things they have brought so far? America, that is engaged in religion, putting billions every year to sponsor missionaries and carry works of God, the work of God around the world. What has stopped America from developing? Elon Musk, who is the richest man, came out this year as the highest sponsor of Rhapsody of Realities, a daily devotional produced by Pastor Chris Oyakhilome. How did that affect him from organizing his spaceship? How? He's even coming out with an aircraft that can take you 30 minutes from London to New York. Not like the other aircraft from Boeing and Airbus that drives 6 to 7 hours from London to New York. How did religion affect him? Let us go out of this poor mindset and begin to face some realities. Let's face some realities.
Okay, let's take I want us to look at religion,
Yes.
Because we see religion is responsible for our situation in Africa brought by the West, or colonialism. When you look at the Asians, especially the Arab nations,
yes,
they are highly religious.
Yes, highly.
In fact, they are ruled on the tenets
the
of
Sharia laws.
Yes, on the tenets of the
Quran.
The Quran.
Yes.
They are very, very
deep
religious.
rooted.
They were also colonized.
Yes.
So, why does this argument hold for Africa, not for the Arab world?
You know, people are influenced by what they consume. Most of the books that you and I read in school gave us the impression that religion is a problem in Africa. Look at Qatar. Qatar is deeply religious. As a matter of fact, one of the most, how do I put it, sane World Cup organized was in Qatar. People were not permitted to enter hotel without showing their marriage certificate with their wives. It means adultery was not permitted. Alcohol was not drunk anywhere in that nation in the stadium. Nobody dressed half naked to enter into the stadium in the football matches. You saw a certain level of decorum, dignity, and respect for humanity in Qatar, because the religious atmosphere influences activities. The World Cup that was there was even far more better than some Christian nations you call Brazil. That's Islamism. The headquarters of Islamism is in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is developing at a very high speed, even though in the desert. Kuwait, very strong and almost have one of the strongest currencies in the world. Go down to Lebanon. Lebanese are in this nation. They are Muslims, but they're the one taking all the top supermarkets in this nation. Why did the religion then not stop them? Cameroonians are Muslims. Cameroonians are also Christians. Africans are Muslim. A greater portion of Nigerian population are Muslims. What have they done so far? I'm trying to give analysis from one place to another. Now in Germany,
why does the Islamic religion affect the guys in
positively
Asia differently, and then
in Africa? Are they reading two different Qurans? Do you know that there's an estimate, a statistic was taken and they said in the next 20 years the whole of East Germany can be Islamized? Yes. The very first time we have had the mayor of London a Muslim. We have had the prime minister of UK a Hindu. These are religions that have penetrated and infiltrated those communities deeply. Deeply, I mean deeply. Now, those communities have not changed. They have not fallen. Their production units have not dropped. Their technology have not dropped. Their advancement have not dropped. How come they are trying to say that religion has affected only Africans? Is it religion that told our ministers to travel to France, see third routes, see the social system there, come back here, instead increase the tariff of money transfer? Is it the religion that tells our ministers to go to Europe after seeing good third roads, see a good social system, and come back here to increase the price of basic commodities? That's the question we are asking. And it sweeps across the continent Africa. Now go to a country like Botswana. Botswana built their university by each family contributing a cow. If you go to a university, the symbol of the University of Botswana is a cow, an effigy of a cow that has been carved and put there. Each family in Botswana gave a cow, and they killed that cow and sold to the European Union. That meat was used, that money was used to build the University of Botswana. Children go to the university, don't pay fees. I mean, cow meat was sold in the European Union, and they use that money to build the University of Botswana. Children go there, they are paid for going to school, and they are not paying fees. That's cow, just meat. Now, is it religion that is not in Botswana? In Mauritius, one of the most developed countries in Africa, and one of the richest countries in Africa right now is Seychelles. These are all islands that do not even have some of the resources that African countries have. Yet, they are comfortable. You go to their nation, citizens are under check. Health condition is superb. Are these countries not also in Africa? I went to South Africa. They will tell us that because whites are in South Africa, that's the reason why you see the South Africans are making progress, and they're making this and they're making that. Those whites who are in South Africa, they are in African continent. They are on this African soil. They don't have 4 legs. And there are also blacks among the South Africans who are making progress. So why do we want to reduce the minds, the intellect, the intelligence of Africans to religion? They will tell you that we build more churches than factories. That's what they are holding on to. Because I'm going to bring out those facts which people that we are building cathedrals of 50,000 people, 100,000 people. We cannot build factories. Churches were not called to build factories. Governments build factories. Churches were not called to construct roads. Government build roads. There are churches in England, and they have not been held to carry out the responsibilities of the government. There are churches in America. As a matter of fact, churches in England are being given grants. Churches in the UK and America, they are being given grants. Government supports churches. But in Africa, they are holding churches at ransom to construct roads that government are meant to construct.
This person says, Mr. Leo, I believe religion is partially a problem in Africa. We have seen communities where small-scale factories that created employment have been closed down and converted to churches. We see young men today spend more time in churches praying for miracle jobs than engage in productive activities. Some African schools today concentrate more on training pupils to know the Bible than learn a trade. The cases are numerous. Yes, you certainly have something to tell him.
Yes, I have something to tell him.
Okay.
My brother, the problem with African businesses, industries, and factories is not church. It has to do with family ties. Go to Africa. Guinness is made in 1757. This Bavaria you drink was made in 1717. I'm telling you that, name me any African business that they are not connected. Just Photo Victor was not in any church. Tell me any African business that has run for 100 years. If you go and check the label of most businesses in Europe and America, they are 14 something, 15 something. There's a drink called 1664. What caused that drink to stay from 1664 and is still relevant today? What has given Guinness the essence from 1757 to today? What made Bavaria from 1717 to be today? This is simply because we do business in Africa around families. We don't do business in Africa as a legacy. And that's the more reason why businesses collapse. So if a business cannot last, a factory cannot last for long, and a church rents the building, the church is not responsible. Because if the business was doing well, they will never turn that structure into a church. This should sink deep in the head of Africans. We are poor in managing business. You heard a Ghanaian preacher who said that a Ghanaian would prefer to take an Indian, a Thailander, and other countries come and work in Ghana, because the Ghanaians are the ones who steal and crumble the business of Ghanaians. We lack sincerity. Somebody, my friend, left his purse in a train in Hong Kong, and they traced him and gave him. Can you leave your purse in a train in Africa and they give you? Can you? Somebody can leave his wallet of $1,000, $10,000 in Thailand. They will trace you and give you that money. Can you leave $5,000 in a street in Douala, even in your pocket, they will not snatch it? Why do business in Africa crumble? Have you ever seen a business in Africa that is from 1882? Go and check all the brands that come from Europe. They are 14 something, 13 something, 12 something, 15 something, 16, 17, 7. All the people began those businesses are all dead. I can tell you, Elon Musk will die and disappear. Tesla will not disappear. Trump will die and go. Trump Tower will still remain. This is because the people believe in building a legacy for the next generation. Our businesses are family oriented, family self-centered. The man is the CEO, the wife is the assistant CEO, the son is the CEO. Richard Branson, the owner of Virgin Airlines, attempted something that closed down his business. He sent the son, and the son studied business management from Harvard. Came back to Virgin Airlines. He made the young man CEO. The young man managed the company for a short time. Virgin Airlines closed down. And then he said, I made a mistake. I gave my son the head with that part on the bottom. They didn't send the son to go and start packing cargo at the cargo launch. They didn't send him to start taking attendance inside the aircraft. He was living at the top without knowing the bottom. Tell me the reason why business don't last in Africa. Before church ever came, were there no business in Africa? Why didn't those businesses last? When the Christianity come to Cameroon, 1858 under Alfred Secker. When did businesses start in America? 17 something. Why did the Christianity in that time not kill those businesses within that period? You are talking people who have facts. Let's keep this drama aside of you using church buildings and as factories. Even if they cut down those church buildings and put factories there, the greediness of the African man will crumble and paralyze his own brother's business. We have a problem that is wrong with us. We have a character problem. We have integrity problem. We have a problem with our attitude. Let's not transfer it to some very flimsy and insignificant infinitesimal reasons. Business in Africa can last because of insincerity, ingratitude. You will take a bomb from the village and bring in a business. The young man will come there to crumble that business before you even think of rising. We are in Cameroon. Can you boast of any company in this nation? I know of Safka, that started in 1972. Organized, opened by late Foster Victor, 1972. That was the oldest business in Cameroon. All the great businesses we had, like the James Obi, who had the Starbucks. Where are the businesses today? Where are the Nangas with their Nobra companies? Could those businesses last? Let's come back home and try to deal with something that are dealing with us. A minister lives here, go to France and sees that they are paying a woman that has 3 children. They give you money every month and they give you a house to stay. They give you free house. They give you free health. You call a doctor, book rendezvous, you go there, he checks you. Whether it is heart transplant, you don't pay a dime in France. I just came out from France last week. And then that same minister goes to France, sees all those things, then come back here, he increases by the transfer and the tariff of mobile money from 10,100 to 10,300. Then you tell me that we are not sick here? We are sick. Okay. They used to say it is dangerous to try to remove a peck in somebody's eye when you have a log in your eye.
Now, Dr. Apostle, there is this issue of loans that are given to Africa.
Yes.
And say, okay, we are tied down also by these loans given by Western banks, the IMF. But why should we still blame them? We know that the US has more debts than Cameroon, which means that almost every country takes these loans. Why is our situation also very peculiar?
I told you when the IMF started in this place. IMF started in 1948, and the first country that took a loan from IMF was France. Africa wasn't the first country that borrowed from IMF. It was France. America is the most indebted nation in the world. Yet America is the world power. Now, the problem is not borrowing. Everybody has a right to borrow. And number 2, nobody is forced to borrow. You borrow out of your own violation. I just told you that Tinubu gave a letter to the Parliament of Nigeria and they have endorsed him borrowing 1.77 trillion naira, which is about $2.23 billion to match up with the Nigerian budget of the year. Follow me, Mr. Leo. The bank is a meeting point between the poor and the rich. The rich man comes to borrow because he has a vision bigger than his money. The poor man comes to save because he has no vision. Hear me very well. A bank is a meeting point between the poor and the rich. The poor man comes to save because he has no vision. The rich man comes to borrow because he has a vision bigger than his money. So the poor man save for the rich man to borrow. Now the problem is, what does that rich man do? If at all this money was borrowed with a vision, we'll get more results. But the money is borrowed without any vision. Money is borrowed and transferred from the borrowing of debt in Africa is a transfer from international account to local accounts. It's not a transfer from international account to local investments. There are no investments done with that money. The management of the resources is the problem. I can tell you, if the government manages resources in this continent Africa very well, they can even help to sponsor and pay church members. Go to UK, they give money for charity in churches. It's because we just sit in Africa and then we talk. We travel. I have decided to take upon myself to I have an intention for this country. That's why I'm not just living like a blind man. I'm moving from nation to nation to understand how things operate. Why that same religion we are insulting in Africa here is the same religion some countries give money to sponsor. Why? So it is visionlessness that makes people borrow from the bank and waste money. That's the truth. So if at all we had vision, we had projects, we had objectives, we had a task to accomplish, When that money is borrowed, it will be properly driven and to produce more income. So note today that the people who borrow for us are our problems.
Okay, those who borrow are the problems,
Yes.
are not necessarily those who are giving.
You know?
Yes. What is the problem? Is it that they don't know this investment knowledge, or their hands are also tied? Because many persons are asking, why do you give money and not control? But
Mr. Leo, the banks borrow you. They don't follow to control. They are waiting for their interest. And once the money is not there, they launch back to collect the money and their interest. All these millennium goals, structural adjustment programs. These structural adjustment programs are very terrible systems put in place because we give them the opportunity. This is what it does. Money is cut off from civil servants, assembled to pay debts for the money that was borrowed and was not properly invested. That's what it is. Civil servants are paying debt for even the project they did not see. That's what structural adjustment program. Edgar Lungu tried that thing in Zambia. Borrowed money from China because China operates a system of debt where it doesn't come open like the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. The World Bank comes and their debts are open and member countries are aware. The China deals with you on an individual note. So when he is burying you from behind as a business, they almost seized the Entebbe airport in Uganda because of the loan that they collected. They almost took away the poor in Dar es Salaam because of the debt that they borrowed from them. But you see, you will never see IMF or World Bank coming to seize properties because of debt. Instead, they introduced structural adjustment program where you will now throw the debt on the civil servants. They will now cut their money, reduce their salary, and then now reduce the money and then direct it now to go and pay debt. So Tico the drink, matter for pigeon, Kumba the drunk because of poor management. But know this, that bank they call IMF, that bank they call World Bank is a meeting point between the poor and the rich. The rich borrow because they have a vision bigger than their money. The poor save because they have no vision. So if our borrowers are going there with vision bigger than their money, then we are going to make more money as borrowers, not debtors.
Okay. Andrew Teme Bakoi, Pan-Africanist, as we announced at the beginning of the program, is in the house with us, and will be joining the discussion. Andrew, we're glad to have you, and thanking God that you were able to make it here. During our last discussion, you still held so strong to the notion that we are where we are up to now because we are not fully liberated from the clutches of the imperialists in the days, though you say they are still very present. How does that operate in 2024 when we know that our independence, we got it in the early 60s?
Mr. Kum Leonard, this is a very complex subject. Like I said before, we have a role to assume blames. And we also should not deny the fact that we are still under attack by the Europeans through systematic colonialism, which is still ongoing.
Okay.
These are facts we cannot deny.
Yes.
So when you talk about where we are today, after
2024,
yes, after 60 to 61 years of independence, this is just to tell you that there is something which we are still not accepting that does not work for us. And I still come back to say that systems are rules and regulations which are put by some authority by which he expects subjects to follow. And it still relates back to when the African nations in the 60s were giving independence. They were giving independence with certain conditions, and politically and economically. And these conditions are some of them which has kept us to where we are today, because we have been struggling to apply systems which did not derive from the spirit of Africanism, nor did they come from the inspiration of our own founding fathers. These were systems that were brought in by foreigners, by the West, that if we were going to run our own economy, if we were going to manage ourselves in politics, these are the rules and regulations of the game, which is what you saw in Mali, is what you saw in Libya, is what we also saw in Iraq and many other countries in the West, Syria, where the American imposed that democracy should be restored so that the people should be given the right to decide their own leaders. And we came to understand that if you look at the case of Libya, look at the case of Syria, look at the case of Iraq, it's still almost what we are complaining today in Cameroon. They have democracy, but they are underdeveloped. They have democracy, they are under heavily exploited. They have democracy, and there's great rage and percentage of corruption, which the West is exploiting oil in Iraq, the West is exploiting oil in Libya, the West is exploiting oil in Syria. And this is the same case. So what is the problem here with democracy? Why would the West imagine a country sits and decides to take initiatives and take laws into their own hands to enter into a nation, break the laws of a nation, break their own laws of the United Nations, to violate the sovereignty of another nation just to restore democracy? So if you look at the factors here, you ask yourself that what are we fighting for? Are we fighting for change, or should we be fighting for democracy? These are the questions. So what is the secret behind democracy? That is why I established a fact that whatever begins first by dividing the people does not seek their interests. And this is what democracy does. It creates multipartyism. That is the birth of corruption and bad politics. Why? Because it creates tribalism, it creates nepotism, it creates partisan politics, and then it creates segregations. Instead of us integrating the beauty of different cultures and diversities of Africa, today we have used them because of democracy as a cause for division. So we have to go back to the source of the rules and regulations which were set in place in the 60s, which we also saw how it was enforced in Libya by NATO through Obama's administration, that democracy should be restored back in Libya, so that the Libyans should be able to decide their own leader. But the question here is, after the revolution of Libya, where NATO brought in democracy, what is the difference between Mohammed Gaddafi and what we have today? It's like night and day. So at the end of the day, you come to realize that what we need in Africa, we need at the point where we have to emerge for our total sovereignty and independence, we need leaders who are best. That is, they have the will and the mind of the people, and these are not partisan leaders.
What is stopping Africans from enjoying all what you are advocating for?
Yes, Mr. Kum Leonard, that is again a very interesting question. You see, this is why education and awareness comes to play, and it's very, very important, because these are foundations which are laid before 90% of the Africans who were not born at the time when these systems were put in place. So they are living in a period where this is like a foundational curse in their life. So it's built in their mindset from the period which they were born and to the age at which they are today. So 90% of the Cameroonians that we are talking today were not in the 60s when these rules and regulations were set in place. That is why when we come on TV, we come to educate, for them to understand what is the foundation that leads us to where we are, that makes our leaders to be this corrupt from top to bottom. That's why I said that the reflection of a leader is their people. The people reflect their leader. And that is why when we talk here in Cameroon about corruption, it's not only about the administration, it's not only about leadership. It goes right back to the common man. Cameroonians are corrupted. Why? Because you are a reflection of your leader, and your leader reflects the people that he is leading.
Thank you.
We have to go back to the foundation, and that is why I say that if we are going to continue down this road of multi-partyism, which is the birth of all what we are talking today, we are not going to see way. If you cite the case of Mali, they did what I'm talking today. If you cite the case of Burkina Faso, they did what I'm talking today. If you cite the case of Gabon, they did what I'm talking today. If you cite the case of Guinea-Conakry, they did what I'm talking today. If you cite the case of Niger, they did what I'm talking today. So we are not against a leader, because we understand that our leaders are in difficulties because they are faced with groups of hyenas and they are standing as one man. Why? Because they have partitioned Africa separately as private state-owned companies by Europeans. And each case is dealt differently. France has 14 colonies. Britain has its own. America has its own. Belgium has its own. So they have divided Africa for their own profit. That is why a country like South Africa is registered in America as a company. These are the things that we are talking. So what do we do in solving this problem? What explains the fact that a lion can eat with a hyena? Only when the lion sees that the kill is too large for him to bring down. He needs the support of a hyena, even though lions and hyenas don't cooperate. But because the largeness of the meat is sufficient for all of them, they will eat together with no problem. And this is how they saw Africa. They saw Africa as a place where if they could come together, they would have endless resources and build legacies for their children for hundreds of years to come. I don't want to talk about voluntary slavery because that's the birth of voluntary slavery. So they knew these things which they put in the beginning. That's why we talk about the Berlin Conference. We saw Berlin Conference 1, we saw Berlin Conference 2. In Libya, we saw Berlin Conference 2.
All of what you're saying is what the Krumas, almost everybody said in the 60s. You are still talking of educating. What then were the roles of those who wrote the early novels like the Chinua Achebes, all of them?
Mr. Kum Leonard, you see, education comes with experience. I think that we have tried. And today in Africa, nobody can deny that really democracy does not work. I think that all over the world today, all nations of the world complain over democracy, even at the level of the leading nation that promotes democracy. Trump was complaining that it is not the voter that decides, it is the electoral college. Those who sit behind the scene who decide. Even in 2000 when George Bush stole 450,000 votes, they still made him a president. So at the end of the day, the people don't have power. What system encourages people? What system encourages a rule of a minority over a majority? Is only democracy. So what I'm saying here is that we are not only educating, but this time we are putting down evidences and facts which cannot be disputed, that this system that we are using, we are not going to survive, and that only gives room for them to exploit us through a minority group. In our division, we divided. And who started this division? They started it. Not only did they divide Africans from Africa, they also divided the continent in 54 states.
Okay, I want us to look at, away from the Western divisional tendencies. Amongst us, the Africans today, don't we have divisions? Our history also talks of intertribal wars. Who occasioned the intertribal wars? What were we fighting against even before the arrival of these guys? Because when every village will tell you that we reached here, we met these people, we overpowered them. All the villages. This Cameroon has more than 200 and something tribes. Were these tribes created by the West?
No. The impression of Europeans dividing Africa has been overemphasized.
But today we see Africans who want to create new states.
That's what I'm saying, that it has been overemphasized. There are Africans within this Africa who are clamoring for United Africa. But there are some countries who are still agitating to split from each other. As a matter of fact, there are countries who won more than 54 states in Africa. It is not the West involved. You don't tell me that it is the West telling the Anglophones from Francophone Cameroon. It is not the West that told Amba to break out from West Cameroon. It is the African man's nature. Before the whites ever came to Africa, we had intertribal wars. As a matter of fact, families fought against each other. That will let you understand that the Bamoons and the Saws are brothers and sisters. Nchariyen and Gonso. It wasn't the West that separated them. Before one became Banso, the other one became Bamoon. You know about Nderi, Ngodi, the brother who came from the Bamba from Gabon. They separated. One went to Southwest. There were no whites by then, and one remained and formed Douala. Those are tribes. So I'm talking about tribes. So if you look at it critically, division syndrome has always been there. It has always been there. That's the reason why distance from womb to Bafut, you find two different languages. That thing is originally from God, from the Tower of Babel when God split humanity. Even God himself did not promote unity. Even inside Europe, countries are still splitting till date. All this Kazakhstan, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, they are countries that break out of the USSR. There are countries today, even Barcelona is still Catalan, still agitating to separate from Spain. The problem is, how has this separation affected Europe? And how has it affected America? America is different countries that come together because not the same laws guide all states in America. Every state has its law and its protocols. And America is a mixture of several nations. Hispanics are there, the Germans are there, Africans are there, just like that. But the issue is they have a coordinated structure that directs and manages their resources. Africa can still be very, very successful, advanced in this state of division. That's the truth. I'm telling you that if all African states come under a single umbrella and we have United States of Africa, there will still be problem. So this division syndrome is not just an issue of the states of Africa. Coming back inside Cameroon here, there is a serious division amongst the people. We have different names like the Mutong, the Tsardina, inside Cameroon, within the same Cameroon here. Now, are you telling me that if Cameroon goes and join with Ghana, Sierra Leone, they will not still have Tsardina, Tongtina, Mutong, and all the Baminda? They will still have it. How do we survive under this atmosphere of division? That is the issue. It is the management of resources properly and the arrest of corruption and embezzlement. That is where the problem is. Corruption is more dangerous than cancer. Corruption kills more than any disease on earth. As a matter of fact, if I will have the chance to sit on this platform, I can take a whole day to give a detailed analysis on the casualties on corruption. UK, France, other countries are not richer than Cameroon. I'm telling you the truth. I'm not telling you stories. For instance, if you are taking a public transport in the UK, Mr. Leo, you pay with your card. The driver has no access to that money. It falls directly in the treasury. But in Cameroon, before the driver will correct it and go and give it to the council, before council will carry it and reach to Fiacom, by the time it passes through all those hands, before it reaches destination, from 10,000 it will be reaching the first of 2,000. You realize that we all have the same opportunity, but it is the management that is the problem. That's the issue. So you go to Europe, you will not see some extra kind of money there. The only issue is that they know how to manage what is at hand. Number two, laws are not respected. Because if laws are respected, money will be properly controlled. People, you park anyhow in Europe, you will pay fine. Yeah, in Cameroon, you can give the man at the roadside 2,000, he will go you. So the money goes to an individual's pocket. That's why I said those people steal there for their people. We steal here for our pocket. If we don't become patriotic even in our stealing, no matter what we do, we will not succeed. So those people are very wise thieves. All this they are broad in Africa, fighting here, bringing confusion here, war here, is to take care of their children. Now it will shock you that even Africans that go to those nations and obtain nationality enjoy the same privileges like citizens of that country. And you expect them to compare their country where they left to where they are right now and be happy with it. They will instead tell those guys to come and steal more here and take care of them there. Because when they were here, even the resources that they had here, they could not take care of them. So if we start having patriotic thieves, even though thieves are not good, but since we always have thieves, let's make the thieves patriotic. That is to say, let them steal and invest the money back here.
Okay. Yes, sir, but before you came, you were talking about this issue of IMF and loans that are sent to Africa. Many persons think that those are instruments that are used to cage and guide our destiny for us not to develop. But Western nations take these loans from these institutions. They are even more indebted than we do. Why don't we use this money to invest correctly so that the profits are used to turn our fortunes around?
Mr. Kum Leonard, that's again another very interesting question which you have just asked. You see, the comparison we keep making does not apply in our context.
Why?
It's simple. We do not have a currency, nor own a currency like they do. Number two, when the IMF and the World Bank was formed in 1943, Africa was not reborn by the West at that time. So the IMF and the World Bank was not built for the African nations. So their objectives and their vision is way different from when we became members of the United Nations. Let us not also forget that. Number 3, the West, in terms of foreign exchange reserves, not 85% is held. This is a growing concern. When we talk of, for example, in our own context, Cameroon today, where we understand that the Swiss bank holds 85% of our natural reserves.
50 now.
So whether it is 50 now or it was 85, but I'm telling you what we have suffered for so many years. You don't know the impact it does on the economy and its masses, which is why we have mass migration out of Cameroon. So these are things that we need to put into consideration, because there's no way. The simple definition of underdevelopment simply means being born with 85 or 80% of your capacity taken away from you. It's like a newborn baby. The child cannot walk. It will need to depend on parents, walk and fall. You need other things to support yourself. That is where they left Africa. As a matter of fact, there's nowhere where a potential businessman needs loan if his business is doing well, as a matter of fact. And if you are going in for loan, it should be win-win. But in the case of Africa, it's compulsory as far as the United Nations is concerned. That is a bank where all African nations must borrow money, because they know how you started. I'll give you an example. In Sudan, after the 3 decades of sanctions, when the former administration was put away by the Americans, and then they brought in a transitional government, the IMF loaned them $20 billion. But that country has been in sanctions for 3 decades, knowing that they have kept them isolated at a point where they could not even move with their one finger. So when they emerged to a different administration, they needed financial support. The IMF was there to loan a transitional government as if it's a business. If you loan them that money, knowing that they do not have capacity, which you are in control of this much resources, like we gave the example also in Ethiopia, where America had a treaty of having to control all the natural resources of Ethiopia. How do you explain the fact? Go to South Africa, it's the same thing, and here we have African, and we want to make comparison between Europe and Africa. It does not go. The only thing I will appreciate here is that if we even had better thieves, but these are the real thieves, are those who come in here with bulldozers, and those are the West. What our government is only doing here, knowing that they are in a territory that is owned by France, for example, they don't see the country like their own, which is why they embezzle. So if we are looking at corruption, we should go back to the very foundation of the corruption and stop only blaming our leaders, because I would say that for a man to blame his father in the presence of an enemy is another form of witchcraft. I think that Africa has always had problems. There's no family without problem. But the problem we are talking here is not a problem of division. It's not a problem here of separation, because human beings and nature, we must always learn to live together by living apart. So having to be in unity does not mean that we are one. That simply means that we have one common interest, but we are different. In diversities, we are different. So we must not be one in the sense that we have one culture, we have one language, we have one nature. No, we should be united and we should be together because we have one common interest. So what I'm saying here of our own case being different is that there was never a meeting in Berlin Conference to start where the Europeans sat down to exploit Europe. There was never a meeting in Berlin where they sat down to exploit America. The only continent where history records that Europeans came together to divide Africa and sell it for themselves was Africa. So our case is very special. There's no way you have to compare Africa and France. Now, even if you go to France, with all the benefits that we may cite that they are in France, that does not mean that. It does not mean that we should assume that they have.
No. We have leaders who have studied in France, in the US, and other schools across the globe, Mr. Atem. They know all these things that you are saying. And we say our hands are tied to take money from the IMF. What has stopped Africans from creating their own bank? Look at what the Chinese are doing. Look at what the Russians are doing. How do we sit lamenting? It's like you know where your problem is coming from, and you use 50 years lamenting under that tree for the world to know, sympathize with you, and come and create a bank where you'll be taking loans from.
Well, that's again another interesting question, Mr. Kum Leonard, and I think that this point you have raised, these are some of the things that we should have been discussing. But like I said again, you will not take a new wine and put in an old wine skin. It does not again apply in our context.
In 2024?
The foundation remains the same, whether it's 2026 or 2030. We are still on the same foundation. And that is why we need to go back to the foundational structures which are put in place, which keeps us to where we are. Until those such foundations are changed, and then we reset or we reformat or we, how would I put it? You put in a new operating system in place, which now allows and permits Russia can do that. They have their own currency. They have their own purchasing capacity. If America wants to buy in Russia, they have to use the currency in Russia and not dollar nor euro.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with China.
You are saying the same. You are saying that Russia has this, China has this.
Yes.
What stops Africans?
But that is where we are now talking of mobilizing the masses.
Yeah, but this mobilization has been going on forever.
Well, but I think now that it is producing results by Mr. Kum Leonard. We can cite countries that we have seen that the changes are there in 2024. In 2024, we have seen great changes in Africa in 2024, with no doubt.
Yeah.
India was colonized by Britain, and no country has given gold to Britain than India. Take it from my mouth. There is no amount of gold that left Africa to the UK as compared to the gold that left India to the UK. The most exploited British colony in the world is India. Are you getting what I'm saying? In 1946, Mahatma Gandhi picked a document of the United Nations that spoke about the sovereignty of states. And he said, but how? India is supposed to be sovereign. He began agitating for the independence of India through civil disobedience. And in 1947, India was granted independence. A poor, broke, exploited nation like any other African country that was exploited. England has the highest reserve of gold in the world, but England has no gold mine. France has the third highest reserve of gold in the world. France has no gold mine. England exploited their gold from India. But I can tell you today, as a former colony of England, India is a power broker in the world today amongst the BRIC nations. Going down to South America, Chile, Brazil, Peru, Venezuela were all colonized by Portuguese. Those, if you go today, Brazil is one of the band of BRIC nations. Brazil was a former colony, former Spanish colony. But if you look at it today, why do we want to make as if it's only Africa that was colonized in the world? Africa was not the only country that was colonized in the world. Africa has refused to make use of its resources. Do you know that Lebanon is a protege to France?
Yeah.
Lebanon till date. As a matter of fact, they are the ones who call France to come and be their master. How does that affect Lebanon's growth? Are Cameroonians not going to Lebanon to go and work as house helps? Are there no Lebanese in this country building the biggest supermarket? Why do we want to insist that a mental problem we have that has not been corrected is what is killing us, and we have refused to grow? It's just like the story of a certain parrot that was tied to a cage. That parrot struggled to fly many days and many months, and it could not. Mentally, it accepted that it had been tied on that cage forever. Do you know that when the owner came and untied the feet of that parrot, I beg your pardon, the parrot could not fly again, because up here, the parrot knew that it is still tied, even though they have untied it. That's Africa. If whites completely take off their hands from Africa after 20 to 30 years, there is no engagement of the whites in Africa, we will still embezzle resources and still attribute our failure to the white man. I think the fact that, or the idea that colonialism is still our problem, is no longer a tangible idea but a mental idea. It's actually a mental issue. Because my brother Adrian said 85% of African reserve is in the Swiss bank. It has been dropped to 50%. Do you know that when the idea of the eco currency came in 2010, through WAEMU, West African Monetary Union, led by Alassane Dramane Ouattara, Macron influenced Ouattara to drag eco under the Eurozone. America was also contesting that the eco should go under the dollar zone. Buhari said to them that we cannot gather 14 of us to create a currency only to submit it under a zone. And that's the reason why till date the challenge of the eco is suspended, because Buhari denied that eco should be an independent currency that bargains in the market like any other currency. All central bank governors and financial ministers were sent to go and negotiate and bargain on the issue of the eco. The problem is this: a man can be the president but not an expert in the field. These guys sent by their central bank governor. When central bank governor went to that meeting, they bargained. After they came out, they said eco should not be submitted neither under dollar or eurozone. This is because they sent people who were experts in that field. Do you know there are Africans who are signing contracts without reading even the terms of the contract? They go to China to sign contract in China and it's written in Mandarin, and they don't understand Mandarin. All they do is tell you put your signature, or you put your signature. Tomorrow you begin to face consequences. They begin to say the West, the West, the West. It is poor negotiations. I don't think that the West just jumped into Africa again. The 50 years colonial treaties that were signed in 1958, that kept most African countries, those treaties expired in 2008. Did they put us at gunpoint to resign those treaties? Because the treaties were 50 years interval. Who are the leaders of today who read the errors of yesterday and they are still repeating it? That if you become the president of Cameroon today, the colonial term 1958 expired in 2008, you will still maintain it? What are we talking about? It boils down back to leadership.
Now, I want us to take glaring examples. In South Africa, it's true, there was independence, but we had the white dominance, and the blacks have been in power now for since Mandela.
Yeah, since 1994.
And then take the case of Zimbabwe, where Mugabe seized power.
Yes.
Now, Africans, let's look at an example of African leadership. How are these nations faring? Because here we have seized power and we are now doing.
Mr. Kum Leonard,
no. You are going to come in.
Okay.
Let him start. I asked you a question and added another one before he came here.
South Africa got political independence. They did not get economic independence. Till today, Eastern Cape is agitating to break out of South Africa. There's still a secession now. I was in Cape Town. That's the history I got. They are trying to separate from South Africa to build an Israel type of nation in South Africa. White. They have made life so expensive in that part of the nation where it is difficult for blacks to stay there. They are still agitating. So there is a political independence, but there is no economic independence. The white minority are the ones running all the major farms in South Africa. So power was divided into two. You guys will rule this country for as long as you can rule. Then we will manage the resources for as long as we can manage. The threat even coming right now is that the guy with the DA party is a white, and he has won 84 seats in the parliament. Ramaphosa had to form a coalition with him in order to stand in for elections, to stand in as president. Do you know that Ramaphosa made that man Minister of Agriculture and appointed some ministers? When it came when the war between Gaza and Israel came, Ramaphosa supported the Palestinians. That man, who is the Minister of Agriculture, the DA head, withdrew himself that he stands with Israel. It already tells you that it spells doom in the future, because the whites are forcefully coming back for the political power. That's why you see there is a threat on the head of Julius Malema, because Malema is preaching not political revival, economic revival. That's why he has EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters, because he knows very well that political independence was given, the economic independence was not given. So the challenge now is the economy, because he that controls the economy influences the politics. But in some other African countries, those who have the politics control the economy.
Okay, you wanted to come in. I don't know whether it was on this subject or the previous.
No, I would just want to expatiate on certain points that he made.
Okay.
He cited the case of Brazil. You see, that is why I tried to explain that some of the reasons why our case as Africans is different is not only tied to colonialism. These are more factors, motivating factors and motives which are behind that a lot of Africans do not understand. If you take the case of Brazil, about 56% are made up of blacks, which you have discrimination, and they don't have favor in Brazil than the whites. So if you take any example around the world where there are black people, you come to realize that that system of segregation and marginalization is permanent. So you ask yourself why. Is it only about colonialism? The answer is no. We have one aspect of exploitation, and we have another aspect of slavery, which is for a particular reason, which a lot of Africans till today do not even understand. Now, he also mentioned the aspect that it is in the nature of Africans to separate, and that even God does not seek for unity, that he seeks for division. I will tell you that no, else we'll not have the 12 tribes of Israel to be as a foundation of the body of the church, which is made up of 12 different tribes. So God believes in unity and believes in a government that seeks the interests of his people. Now we talk about the Anglophone that he did mention, that the Anglophone and the Francophone has nothing to do with colonialism. But again, you still use the same word, Anglophone and Francophone. Where do you have those two hegemonies? You have it from Britain and you have it from France. So it means that the problem and the segregation and the conflict in the Northwest and the Southwest still goes back to colonial legacy. We cannot dispute the fact. And these are things that if we are approaching a solution towards it, it should not be as if that the foundation of this problem is not tied back to colonial legacies. I don't want to go down into the details of explaining that and even providing a solution to it, but let us not deny the fact that what we are suffering today in Cameroon, the separation of the segregation of the Ambazonia is still tied down to colonial legacies. We cannot deny those things. So we are not saying that a house should not have a problem, but the point here is that having to have a problem and having to be exploited by a foreign hand or an external force, which is at the detriment of the population of those that are being in conflict, is another case. So when we talk about the conflicts in Africa, and he is saying that in spite of all of this, we can do well. That if you tie a parrot and you take the rope out of the parrot will still remain there because the problem is up here. If we were in that case that we're in Cameroon or we're in Africa, I will accept with him. Now let's cite the case of Mali. Is it the same case? They have been let loose. Is the parrot still there? The answer is no. The parrot has gone. You cite the case of Niger. Is the parrot still there? The answer is no. The parrot has gone. So once you lead the parrot away, and the parrot understands that where I was, this is not where I was supposed to be. What is holding mayors of the cities in Douala and Yaoundé not to get us to where we Thank you very much, Mr. Kum Leonard. This point that you have just brought brings me back to what he mentioned before of the structural adjustment policies. And he talked about debts. Now we do not understand, we don't know, even though I had the statistics about 2022 of the debt Cameroon is owing and many other all African countries, which I still have that data evidence in my email. So if you look at the debts that were cancelled and the existing debts and where the structural adjustment policy comes to play, it makes it very complicated. Now let me give you an example. If your nation is considered as an underdeveloped nation which has applied for debt cancellation because it considers itself to be underdeveloped, it does not have the capacity to pay its loan, and so they put you under that rate of debt cancellation where you have structural adjustment policies. Also, that they are in control of certain development that you would want to engage because you need money for it, and so they will have to determine how it's going to be done, which is why in Cameroon local councils cannot make certain decisions because those decisions will affect those treaties and those structural adjustment policies which our nations do have with the West as far as our debts are concerned, as far as the structural adjustment policy is concerned, which is why also I cited a very clear example was the breach here in Douala. And I keep saying it again. We saw how those structural adjustment policy could influence a government not making a decision.
So
talk less the mayors that you are talking about. Which mayor would not like to develop his community?
When I get what you are saying, it
Yes.
means that all of the underdevelopment we see in Cameroon is because we lack funds.
That's again another interesting question.
No, from what you are saying, you say we are unable to raise money to develop what we are doing, and you are asking the question: which mayor would not want to develop his community? Or
yes, we have to also, we will not deny the fact that the country Cameroon is economically in crisis. We cannot deny the fact, which is why we have increase of taxes everywhere, because the government has to meet up with other responsibilities of development. The government also has to meet up with payments of debts, which is why we have high taxes. It still falls back to the common man. So what I'm saying here is that these things affects development. Not that you would agree with me that if really like you may see in different parts of Africa today and in different parts of the world, you see development going. But I say again that even when we talk to development, the context of it should be defined. Because we are in a country where we have 27 million Cameroonians. And so when we are talking about development, we should be able to see how these 27 million Cameroonians should be able to have a future in their own country. That is the first foundation of development. Not they're doing this and doing that. At the end of the day, we are unable to afford them. It does not meet our direct needs.
Now, let us assume that, okay, the policies put in place through the IMFs and the structural adjustment programs, like you cited, are responsible for the lack of resources to fix Douala and Yaoundé and other cities in Cameroon. And you also think that with the resources available, everybody wants to fix things. We have a plethora of ministers in prison because they took resources meant for development and chopped the money.
Yes.
And we have mayors who have been indicted severally.
That's true.
Yes, which means that there is money to some extent, but there's
also issue of management.
There's also some level of mismanagement.
Mismanagement, exactly. That I also agree with you. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, if, for example, a minister is caught of having to embezzle 20 billion, I don't know how many records of it, whether it is banked in the US or it is banked in the West or it is banked in Cameroon. I don't know any records of how much has been retrieved back from the money which they embezzled. You see, sending a prisoner to jail and allowing him to go with the money is still another form of corruption, because the whole system is such that promotes.
Yeah, but do you really think that if you were accused of embezzling 20 billions and you were taken to court, you would readily bring back the money? Is it possible to bring back 20 billions when you know that maybe you had bought houses for some women with that money, you had opened up some private investments with that money? Where do they expect you to go get this money back? Sell the houses and vehicles you bought for. Can
I mention something very important here? If a minister is indicted for embezzlement of an amount of 20 billion, and we assume that this money was taken in the space of 5 years, because it's not in one day. Now, in that period where he was embezzling this money, who was doing the checks and balances of the money that was disbursed either for development or for a project? And if he does not execute the first project, for example, and they still give him money, he did not execute the second project, and then at the end of the day he's indicted for 20 billion, there's a question sign there, because if you want to go even in detail, you may see that it's even politically motivated, that particular minister may not have stolen that amount of money.
Okay, let's take the example of the former president of Tanzania. He came to power with the same Western influence and interactions, but did things differently. We've seen Ghana under different leadership also changing the lifestyle of investment and others of its citizens. We've seen nations who are making strides to change the lives. I don't know whether Angola was not colonized, but when we look at
it was colonized by the Portuguese.
It was colonized. But how do other leaders succeed in imposing themselves and turning away from what we are decrying today?
That's a million-man question, Mr. Leo. I wish to ask, when Magufuli came to power, he suspended the celebration of the National Day and took the money in construction of better roads.
Yeah, we are celebrating every day.
Because priority, it goes back to the leadership. There were several leaders before Magufuli came. Mwalimu was there, Benjamin Mkapa was there, Nze Asamuni was there, Jakaya Arish Kikwete was there. Before Magufuli came, the feed for Samuel coming the seat. These leaders all celebrated this National Day. But a visionary leader came and saw no need for celebration. Instead, he turned a National Day to a cleanup campaign, diverted the money from tarring roads from Dar es Salaam to the newly constructed capital, Dodoma. That is a visionary leader. It boils back down. That money was not from the West. The money was not taken from anywhere. That money was money that was kept in the coffers of the Tanzanian bank. And he used that money that was supposed to be wasted on very trivial issues to develop the economy. That's one part. Secondly, when he came, the first thing he did was that he reduced the cabinet of ministers. He cut off all first-class flight and the hiring of private jets. He himself took economic class. I'm talking about he was operating within the confines of the available resources. World Bank was there. IMF was there. All those who were collecting things from Tanzania, they were there. But the money that was in his hand, he was able to reduce that money and divert the function of that money for something different. He said no Tanzanian minister should go out for conferences, that the ambassadors of those nations will represent the government in any of their meetings. That is to say, Tanzania minister in the United States, ambassador in the United States, will represent Tanzania in the United Nations General Assembly. If there's Afro-China Summit, the Tanzania ambassador in China will represent. Our ministers here, we carry 9 ministers, plus the president. Hire a private jet, fuel it to and fro, feed, lodge in hotel, spend money. That's one that can tar road from Womb to Befang. It is used to hire aircraft. I'm talking about mismanagement of resources. This has nothing to do with colonialism. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a minister being caught with 93 billion that he stole from the nation. We don't know where that money is. And he's staying in the nation's national prison in an apartment that has AC with television, very comfortable there. That's somebody who stole money. We have somebody who created 26 different separate accounts, director of payment, paymaster general. He created 26 different hot ghost accounts where he was paying salaries there every month. He did that for many years. That man was arrested and sent to prison. No kobo was recovered. That's the money that can build the road from Bamenda to Douala. It's in the pocket of an individual. That's just a few we have discovered. Talk less of those who have saved chunks of money in banks abroad. Where is colonialism in this? Recently, 1,117 ghost workers were discovered in our government. Magufuli fished out 14,000 ghost workers in the Tanzanian government who were earning salaries who were not existing. That's not colonialism. That's thievery and theft within the cycle of the nation. It has nothing to do with IMF and World Bank. Magufuli also came and saw that most of the mines in Tanzania were privatized. He seized those mines and collected more percentage for the government. There are Chinese in our nation here extracting gold in Yokaduma and other parts of the country. We don't even know where that one is going from because we don't have any particular structure where the finance is going to. If you want to put all these things together Are you going to tell me that it is the whites or the colonial master that told our president to hire an aircraft, carry 9 ministers who are doing practically nothing?
No, you can also prove that they are not doing anything.
What are they going to do, Mr. Liu? They are trying to go to do what in China?
Yeah.
If I carry to China, you go and sit down and do what? Do you need a secretary, a minister secretaries? You need a secretary to go and put down what you are going there to do and to submit.
He's going to discuss business. So these ministers are experts in different domains.
So I'm landing. These are all budget wasted on issues that have no head, no tail. We have how many ministers in this country? Botswana was just elected a new president. They have 18 ministers. 8 of those ministers are below 40 years. They are youths. We have 45 ministers. In addition to that, one ministry has 3 ministers. We now broke ministries in Cameroon like a loaf of bread. Education has primary, basic, and higher. And they have added vocational. 4 ministers sitting in one ministry. To minister what? To administer what, Mr. Liu? When that job could be compressed and given to an individual and a few directors to manage it and make the load, weight, and the burden reduced. These are all channels through which people take advantage to gather money because they have a very limited time to stay in power. So everybody is looking for an opportunity to consume money. All these things put together are the things that crush down the government and make things frustrated. One time they bought about 100 and something tractors and parked somewhere in the bush. They have not cultivated 1 square land with those tractors. Those are all budgets that were supposed to be used for something else. The one that came recently was the one they were doing film from one region to another. I mean, I don't understand. These are the things I'm talking about, that if we take colonial masters out of the face of this thing, to be sincere, the amount of money we waste here, if we judiciously and wisely use that money, we can sustain this economy better than ever before.
We can sustain the economy. Adding Atemibako, but you did not talk about Zimbabwe.
Yes, Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, who came to power.
No. Mugabe seized the farms, yes.
Yeah, he seized the farms from the whites, yes, and he gave it to the Zimbabweans. The Zimbabweans have not developed those farms the way whites were developing the farms. Do you remember Mandela came out from prison after 27 years and said they should never send whites out of South Africa because the way the whites had developed the country, he came and saw South Africa far more better than when he went to prison. So he said whites should not be sent out of South Africa because they are the ones who give that nation the facelift. I'm not talking a story. These are countries I've traveled to. Mugabe took farms from the whites in Zimbabwe and handed it to blacks. Those farms were nowhere to be found. A time came where the Zimbabwean dollar, one note, had $100,000. Now they have changed the Zimbabwean currency. You see, Federal Leclerc said something in 1986. He said, if you give the black man gun, they will use such one note, Zimbabwean dollar note, one note, $100,000 note. The money finished. They have changed a new currency now. Now we say we should give things to blacks, give things to blacks, give things to blacks. If those countries are looking good today, it's because whites were there. Do you know that the Prime Minister of Ireland, Netherlands, they used their bike to go to work? Is it the white that told our presidents and our governors to be running with 16 Land Cruiser when they are leaving my 16 to go down to my 17 pack? Is it the whites, is it colonial master who told them? Ask me. A minister lives Yaoundé and is going down to police college. He has 15 vehicles and all those vehicles are fueled by the state, carrying people who have no mission in his mission. What's that for? Then you tell me it's colonial master, something is wrong.
Okay.
Well, let me explain that to him very correctly.
Okay.
You see, sometimes I like the way you talk, but you really miss ingredients which are very substantial.
Like
back up what you say.
Let him.
Let us look at what you say. For example, in our case, for example, in Cameroon, what we are suffering here, that goes back to colonial legacy. It's not what you give like an example. You have given example in South Africa, how developed South Africa is. Now, you can agree with me that the blacks that are in South Africa are still marginalized and they are still being dominant by the white minority. And as a matter of fact, the development which you have cited in South Africa are not beneficiary for the black people.
Yeah,
because they cannot afford the standard of living created by the white man.
This is, you are telling story. I've been there.
Mr.
What you are saying here is story.
Mr. Ambe, what you have been there is like you've seen a beautiful woman.
No.
I'm telling you what I'm telling you.
No. You can't tell.
Can I give you an example?
I've been there.
Can I give you an example? How do you explain the fact that? How do you explain the fact that about 7.5% white minority controls 75% of a country's economy, where you have about 56% of black people? How do you explain the fact?
Yeah, just make a point.
So my point I'm trying to make here is that when you look at Cameroon and he talks about those convoys, let us look at the setup of the political sphere. We have over 317 political parties. The party in which he is talking of is the CPDM party. What party do you belong to? What party does he belong to? At the end of the day, you come to realize that we are here under partisan politics, which simply means that those who are in a particular party enjoy the benefit, who are the ones ruling and who have the resources of the nation at hand. They will do well.
Minister is not speaking.
Allow me to talk.
No, you are taking my discussion out of context.
It's not out of context. We are talking here on the context.
Not a party. I didn't call party.
But this is a context. We have political parties.
No, sir. Talk about government, not party.
Allow me to talk.
Talk about government, not party.
You are not cited. I am giving you the example that you have made. You talk about Tanzania, about Magufuli. You gave very good, sweet analysis about Magufuli, which is true. But that is why I try to tell you that every leader is a reflection of his people. Now, a leader can come in Cameroon who does not understand the terrain of Cameroon and is a good leader. Trust me, in CPDM, you don't need to be straight. If you go there with a good conscience, you come to realize that they don't need people who are straight. They take you out. And these are the same things that we have been suffering.
Yeah, but the question
what happened to Magufuli in Tanzania?
Yeah,
he was assassinated.
Yeah, but the question
Magufuli was killed in Tanzania. What happened with Mohammed Gaddafi in Libya? He was killed. So when you talk about that, this has nothing to do with colonialism. How do you explain the fact that NATO entered Libya and removed Mohammed Gaddafi, and you tell me it's not colonialism? So this is you see, when you look at something in the eye, and you see how beautiful, and you can make your analysis by what you see. You don't see what is behind. And this is what I try to explain to Cameroonians, is what people don't see. What you have been explaining here is what anybody can see, and anybody can appreciate that. Oh, you go to South Africa, is good. Oh, you go to here, is good. Yes, but at the end of the day, it's like I was asking somebody. We talk about development. What good is that development to you when you don't have control of an economy? When you don't have control of your politics? How beneficiary is that development is to you? At the end of the day, it's like you people want us to settle for something lesser. The people you are giving us examples here are people who have everything. From everything, they have everything. You are making comparison with us. We don't have. You say you gave another example of in South Africa, they allow the blacks to control the politics while the whites control the economy. Politics and economy, which one is stronger? It's like you say you make me the king, and then you are the king of economy. If I am the king that rules the decision of a nation, then I'm in control of my economy. So indirectly, what you are trying to explain to us is that not only are the whites in control of the politics, they are also equally in control of the economy, which is why they will always use black, greedy and partisan leaders to put in front, thinking that these are black people, but behind they are being motivated and pushed and directed by these European powers. The white minorities in South Africa, which you are talking about, if as of this time we are talking about, let's say 8.5% of the population, who are standing behind that population? The Americans are standing behind them. They are not that small minority that you are looking today, because there's no way. There's no way in yes.
I mean, let's look at the influence, because we are talking about the West.
Yes.
Do we still talk in 2024 about Western influence in Africa, as if the Chinese have not? Do we consider the Chinese influence, the Russian influence in Africa today? And if we were to look at the CPDM that we are talking about, are they not Africans?
The CPDMs are Africans, but it is a minority group.
Yeah, but they are Africans.
We are not refusing the fact. They are. But what are we talking about? They are Africans that are managing an administration and are managing a nation, not for the interest of the Cameroonians. They were not in the default beginning put there for the interest of the Cameroonians.
No, but when they construct houses and their children are getting the benefits, are these children not Africans? Are they important white? I mean, they see them guys because you say they're not working in the interest.
But this is what I'm trying to tell you.
At the end of the day, they still work for the interest of their families and their children. Wow.
Those are personal interests. We are talking here of national interests. When you get into administration or leadership, we are talking of national interests and your foreign interests.
I say so because you say they are not working for the interests of Cameroonians.
But their family members are not the masses. That is just a very small handful of people you cannot even mention. So this is what I'm trying to explain here is that when I'm not excluding the fact that we are not responsible. I have made it abundantly clear.
No, your point
we
that
are
you are not
responsible in
responsible.
solving these problems which are brought to us. And I am not the one saying it. I believe there are so many videos out there on social media, on media, which we see how Europeans do acknowledge the fact of colonialism, economic exploitation over Africa, over raw materials. We don't deny the fact of it. So for you to see an African who is saying that they are not responsible, yes, they are not responsible in solving the problem. But those problems, we have to solve those problems. And like I said before, these are the areas where we need to gear to. What do we do in making these changes?
In 1 minute, please. We're out of time.
So what do we do in making these changes? And that is why I say that Magufuli was not a partisan leader, but he was in Tanzania where there were opposition parties. Such foundation, a good leader will find it very difficult to survive. That's why in Libya, there were no opposition parties in the days of Muammar Gaddafi. You go to Mali, there are not opposition parties. We need a society, a nation, where we don't have interferences. Bad politics and partisan politics is what has kept us where we are today. And this is what I talk about, tribalism and partisan politics. So we need to stop this game of politics. Politics is not good. Democracy does not work for Africa. We have to accept these facts. And until we get there, then we start understanding that if the black man is being attacked, it doesn't matter whether you're in Africa, it doesn't matter whether you're in Brazil, it doesn't matter whether you're in America, it doesn't matter whether you're in Europe. This is a need for Africans to come together and say, hey, we are under attack. We need to come together in order to survive. So this thing I'm talking of unity is not about only colonialism. It has other aspects to do. And lastly, I'm going to establish this fact that colonialism over Africa is not only for the natural resources. Anybody who wants to rule the world, you can only rule it from Africa. That is the biblical principle. Okay. So it is very important that they keep Africa the way it is and rule Africa and rule the world from Africa, which is why you realize that the multinationals
who colonized Canada?
Pardon?
Who colonized Canada?
Well, I may not be very versed in that. I don't think I have done the research.
They are white, yeah?
It doesn't matter. But I told you, like I gave you the example of America. They fought.
Canada was colonized. America was colonized. Yeah, but one last word, please. We are out of time.
Point of correction. Libya was never colonized. Never. Libya was never colonized. Ethiopia was never colonized. If they kill Gaddafi, it's not colonialism.
It is what? Is it not democracy?
I say it is not colonialism. You are calling. Let me talk now, Why, my brother? Why? Let me speak now.
That's the best of
Let me speak now. Libya was never colonized. Keep your colonialism aside out of Libya. Libya was never colonized. Libya was never colonized.
Is it colonized now?
I say it was never.
Is it colonized now?
Not colonized.
It's not colonized now.
It's not colonized.
Is Iraq not colonized now?
It's not colonized. Libya was never colonized.
You don't know what you're talking about.
The issue is that we don't argue to win. We argue to learn.
But exactly the
your
point.
Your arguments are out to win. You're not arguing to learn. You're not arguing to bring
the
facts.
point here is that if you
are not allowing me to talk now, I've allowed you to talk now. You talk. I've told you that if you go down history, Libya was never colonized because they saw nothing good in that land. Gaddafi took that land as a desert and turned it into an evergreen forest and turned it into a city, turned it into a paradise. You understand? Gaddafi's attack came as a result of him fighting for the entire continent of Africa. That was when NATO combined together and attacked Gaddafi. It falls back to us Africans because all the African leaders who have been enlightened could not join and fight. Now that Russia has attacked Ukraine, America has joined Ukraine, other countries have joined Ukraine. Where are the African countries to have joined Gaddafi to defend him against NATO? Nobody. I tell you about the greed and selfishness of African leaders. Israel has attacked Hamas. America has joined Israel. Other European countries have joined Israel to attack Hamas and to attack the Houthis. Iran and other countries are joining into fight. Where were the African leaders when Gaddafi, who brought them the lone satellite, where were they? It was because the self-centeredness and greediness of African leaders is what allowed them, because Museveni said, he said, we betrayed Gaddafi. Because if the other African leaders knowing what Gaddafi intends, they rallied around him, they would not have faced the damage that he faced. I'm giving you one fact after the other. Coming back to South Africa. South Africa is a minority, they have white minority. Let me tell you, the most productive farms in South Africa were not planted by blacks. Whites planted those lands. Blacks did not plant and they seized it from them. It's the whites who planted that place. The issue is the majority of the economy is owned by them, because first and foremost, the Africans who were the Dutch that came there are hard-working people. The clash between the Dutch and the British in South Africa was because the Dutch came there to settle. The British came there to extract. That was the history of South Africa. Why the people of South Africa, who were the original people, the Zulus, the Xhosas, the Swanes, they were the original inhabitants of that land. There are even a group of persons who were the original people, who were the nomads in that land, who have no place. If you go to the Unity, the Union building in South Africa, the presidency, you will see a thatched house owned by these people tiding Bashi. They are there, they live there because they claim that land belongs to them. They are the original owners of South Africa, just like the Red Indians in America, but they have no place. These whites are industrious. It's not mouth. You go to Zimbabwe, the best lands were for them because they cultivated those lands. It's just because since it is our land, Africa, we wanted to claim what we didn't labor for. The whites built those plantations. It is true they own the economy, but it is their technology they engage and build those farms. It's not like some land that they come and seized the farms. No, they seized the land, but they did not seize the farm. They planted those farms. That is big in South Africa. If I want to give this analysis, please. In addition to that,
no, we have just 1 minute, please.
In addition to that, we cannot be claiming.
Allow me the 1 minute. Allow me the 1 minute because now the point he's trying to make here.
We didn't produce those farms. It is stop noise.
The point he's trying to make here.
We are in Cameroon. We are in Cameroon. No, please. We have ended. No, we have ended. We have CDC here. Let us cultivate. Nobody has CDC. No. We have CDC.
Mr. Kum Leonard.
We are out of time. Thank you guys for coming. We have CDC in Cameroon. Let us cultivate CDC and make CDC great again. Thank you guys for coming, and for all of you for watching. Stay blessed. Bye bye.